The Rules Review Committee to order. We'll start with the roll call. So Neal?
Here.
Wadinsky? Here. McElhaney? No, and Watson?
Here.
All right. That's first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of the January 13, 2021 meeting. Everybody have a chance to review those, and I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Okay, a motion from Neal, second by Wadinsky. And I think we could just say all, do we need to take a roll call vote on that one, or all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Okay, it's approved. Okay, item number one. Actually, item number two, excuse me. Discussion and possible action on report from Attorney's Office of Research of examples from other municipalities' rules on council members requesting to speak during meetings, including rules on time limits and limitations on number of times to speak on an issue. We have the assistant attorney here. It's, do you have any, or actually Jacob ends here too. So, I don't know, do you want to kind of start us off with this, or?
Yeah, I don't think this one's.
I think that one you got to kind of really hold up close to your mouth.
All right, is this on? Okay, so as you can see from the sheet, those are the municipalities that we were able to determine what their rule is. A lot of them just took what the default Robert rule was of they can speak 2 times. 10 minutes is the default time limit. So if we don't want to do anything, that's what the Robert rules is. Otherwise, if we want to have it different than that, then we can change. These municipalities, they didn't say if there was issues with this many times or the duration, or if they wish they had more. They basically just said this is what we have, and it's what we've been doing.
Okay. Watson?
So at any time though, I mean, if we did limit it and limit time, we could still, as a body, vote to extend more time to a member if they, like as a collective, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, twice in 10 minutes each, 20 minutes total, that's a lot of talking.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I suppose you could have any number of times you can talk and try to keep track of the total number of minutes, but that would be insane, so. Any other discussion?
I guess I'll just mention that on the county board side, they don't have time limits for how long you can speak except for at the end of the meeting. But they did limit the number of times you could speak. So you could speak 3 times to an issue. Otherwise, then they would need consent of the body to have you speak for a 4th or more time.
So in other words, Nate, if they want to move from the default from Robert's rules, since they adopt Robert's rules, and move away from the 10 minutes or 2 times on a pending matter, then we would maybe want to put that rule into our ordinance?
So if they want more. Yeah, so if you want more than twice, or if you want more than 10 minutes, then we'd have to make a rule, but right now, that's what our default is twice in 10 minutes each.
But you're still allowed to ask an unlimited number of questions. So if you coach your debate as a question, you know, then it gives you sort of a loophole. Yeah, Watson.
And I guess, have we been keeping track of, I mean, we haven't really been keeping track of it as of yet anyway, and who would be tasked with sort of keeping track of it? Would it be Madam Mayor?
It'll be the chair.
At this point, it's been me kind of using my phone to
Okay.
time.
And like Jim said last week, or last meeting, we wouldn't do this as a limiting thing in a committee. And like a standing committee, it would just be for council as a whole.
I think you raise a good question, because I think our rules are clearly directed at the council's rules, and whether we apply those in committee settings or not, we've bantered about a little bit, and we have not clarified that yet in our rules, that they apply to the standing committee settings or whatever. So that's a good question. I would think that would be a more informal setting with the standing committees and that we would apply that speaking rule to the formal council meetings. But again, that would be up to your body to decide.
Jim?
Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of making any rules to the committee level, because that's where the work needs to be done and the discussion needs to be made. And then once it's written and then shipped on to the council, then the council can review it. They can ask their questions to the proper people before the meeting and get their answers. And then when they come to the meeting, they're prepared to just, well, yes, no, have some statements or have a new question that came up and get the business done. I think the problem is we're taking a lot of time in council when some of the work for us new members who didn't know how to really proceed at the beginning, to get more prepped ahead of time and get done with the meeting so we can move along and do it at a correct pace.
Yep, Deb?
Hi, Deb Ryan, 702 Elm. I guess I'm glad to hear about Ann's clarification to the city council, that it happens, for my perspective, I've been on the public side and on the council side now. And at times, with some previous councils, that it seemed to be more adversarial, or I know one time I came up to talk and I got yelled at before I said a word. So I guess for me, we all have a side of us that's fairly talented, and some of us not so talented. And I had siblings that excelled in drama and debate and all that, and it's like, oh my God, why would I ever want to do that? So for me, for some of the stuff, I'm educated. I've had a very eclectic life. Lost my father at 22. So I learned to adapt and learn things that maybe a lot of other people haven't learned. Took courses in business law, got my master's in business, and thought, well, maybe I'll go to law school. So for me, I have a really eclectic background, and so I'm thinking things all the time. And even though I may have questions, because I've got a weird background of information and interest and looking at our fiduciary rules to make the best decisions and challenge the staff, yes, I can ask a lot of questions to hope to focus that the staff will answer and give us the information so we make the right decisions. But sometimes they don't. Like on the real estate contract, it seems like I knew more about it than any of the staff did. And I thought that they would have more of that to really focus it so we wouldn't have taken so much time. But at times, I don't know if it's just my perspective, that I feel like for some people not saying anything, this is the time that you should be when you're in the meetings. And so are some people making decisions before the meeting of how they're going to vote and then don't say anything? And that some of us are having discussions or looking at, okay, well, maybe this alternative, and especially about issues about, putting in residential housing near Cleveland, which may still be a health hazard. I mean, I can see where we would have some long debates. But at a certain point, if the staff isn't getting us in the right direction, and I feel like we're being misled, and my colleagues are being misled, I would like to have that opportunity to let the council know and our members so that we hopefully will maybe making the right decision. The other thing is that I'm aware of at least 4 people on the council that have some disabilities. And I'm not necessarily going to say, but for some it may be obvious, for some it may not be. And I don't want it and we're not really looking at the American Disabilities Act, which has been around for 30 years. But it's part of the underlying issue. If back 30 years ago, back in 1990, when they adopted it with George Bush Sr., people that were disabled had to crawl up the stairs in Washington, D.C., because they had no way to get up there. And there's a number of disabilities that some may be hidden, some you may not think of, and so some may not be obvious. And I'm just worried at some point, you think we're all talented in public speaking. I am not. This is a little uncomfortable for me, but it's my duty to represent the people and try to make the best decisions. So I'm hoping that we can bear and be a little bit more open to different perspectives, and that some people, just because they get caught up in the discussion, may have some brain fog and then want to get back to these others' decisions, that we aren't necessarily curtailing good discussion. And so my comments are also for the other items that I happened to today work with a young disabled woman who's 30, and she has decided to come and tell her concerns about transit, and I've been listening to her all weekend and this morning, and she is very uncomfortable, but she has the mindset that the city needs to know, the mayor needs to know, the council needs to know, and even though I'm uncomfortable, I'm going to do it. And then she's 10 minutes later, oh my God, what did I do? And can I really handle this type of thing? And I'm very proud of her, but there's also the side that I'm a baby boomer, but back in the 70s when I was going to school in accounting, it was 5% women. And that I've dealt with, and a number of women my age have dealt with issues of being a minority. And we have been some of those that took a lot of the hits, and eventually most fields are 50% women. But that I hope that the rules aren't going to be used as a way to limit debate and discussion, and or kind of feel that some people are monopolizing the conversation, and that on some subjects that some of us alders may know a little bit more in depth, that we should be given the opportunity to hear that. But I just wanted to give you my perspective, and that it hadn't been really talked about with the ADA per se, but there could be someone in the future that's just brand new and overwhelmed and scared and frightened. And I would like to see we give them benefit of the doubt and say, breathe and continue with the point. It's not meant to be, unlimited, but we have so many major decisions to be making with so little funds that I would like us to be thorough and really be discussing in the chamber and in the committee, and hopefully bring the best plans forward and question the mayor and the staff not to go forward with a decision that, it's incomplete and maybe should go back and be tabled and be brought back in future months. Thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, Deb, for those comments. I think we really appreciate those. And I think one of the things that we're trying to determine here is we don't really want to curtail the robustness of conversation and debate, but we also, when the body meets in the chambers, we want to be able to move along in a manner that's going to be the most, I don't want to say expeditious, but, in a deliberate manner. So without having, to kind of, things just sort of slow down or get off the rails or whatnot. There's a lot of what can be done in committee. So, Sarah?
I think having a guide out there, just like an expectation, may help to focus thoughts. Because if we would say, okay, I can speak to this twice for 10 minutes, maybe I come prepared with an outline of what I want to say, and I know I have these 2 times that I really want to capitalize, and of course things are going to come up that we want to discuss and can flesh out through the debate. But then having that guideline to say, okay, this is my expectation, I'm going to focus my thoughts a little, come with a prepared speech or some thoughts on the issue, and then, if we have to change it mid-meeting, then so be it, right? We can vote to allow a person to speak again, right?
To add more time or opportunities to speak, yeah, because currently, we're just at 2 debates at 10 minutes each, which is what Robert's Rules of Order would specify, so, yeah.
And sorry, I guess to add on to that, sometimes I think having more of a limit may allow for more inclusion of council members to speak too, because sometimes I feel, not that I don't get a chance to speak, but, sometimes it feels like there are dominant people, and Deb, I think you mentioned that, there are dominant people on the council that do talk, more so than others, and maybe limiting it will allow more people to share their views. So, can I make a motion, or no?
Yeah, make
Alderman
'em.
Neal has his hand up.
Oh, let's get Tom first, and then, Tom, you want to go ahead? I missed your little hand
Sure.
there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'm a little cautious about limiting the number of occurrences, number of times one might speak at council. And I think, Alder Watson maybe had been sort of alluding to this in that in the course of discussion, something new can come up. It's germane to the topic, but it's another line of thought, another piece of information, and that can steer discussion, in a new and helpful direction. So to try to limit, we've already heard from you twice, so that's it. I think that's not a good way to go. I do think that it would be okay to have, the mayor or whoever's running the council meeting that session do have some sort of time limit though on how long somebody can, talk and talk and talk. Sometimes I'm one of the ones that tends to go off on a tangent, so I don't see anything wrong with, some, like a mayor saying, Alder Neal, you've got about 1 more minute, so if you could wrap it up, please, and that would be fine. But saying I can't speak again, if something brand new came up would be stifling. Thoughts?
You bring up a very good point, and I know, some occasionally at council things come out. It's you would hope that most everything would have been vetted in committee, but some there could be a change of direction or something that may bring the need for more debate. But I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know, Sarah, did you want to make your motion, or do we want to? Huh?
I guess I was going to move to limit the number of times a person could speak at general council to 2 times with a 10-minute limit. So I
Okay.
guess actually writing that in from Robert's rules into the rules. But I'm not sure if I have support.
Would we actually need to do that if it pertains, if it's the same as Roberts?
You wouldn't have to. I mean, that is the default, and you do adopt Robert's rules, but it might just be a little more formal and visible. I mean, because it's in the ordinances. I think that would be harmless to include it or repeat it in your rules. I don't know if Nate disagrees with me. I don't think it would hurt anything. And it would be written out. You know, it's a form thing, like we say, well, you're gonna pay, instead of, we took all the fees out of the 1,000 pages of ordinances and put them on a schedule in the clerk's office, so they're not readily visible when you're reading through the ordinances. This would be readily visible and available and kind of called out and highlighted if you were to verbalize it in the rules rather than just expecting that everybody knows that that's what Robert's Rules says. And if a later edition actually changed that, you'd have to amend the ordinance to change your rule. That would be the only other difference.
Okay. Jim?
I really wouldn't want to limit the number of times that someone's going to speak if there is new information coming out. What I would like to limit is people reiterating their case again for a second or more time when we've already heard what they've had to say, because that's just taking up time and we know what their stance is. And I respect that. But, so how do we do that?
Okay.
And
Okay.
maybe you want to amend Sarah's motion to keep it to 10 minutes each, or to 10 minutes per time, but not limit the number of times a person can speak, and then leave it to the chair to decide, you know, to call on people when their lights come on. That's totally at her discretion. And if they start down the same road again, I mean, you certainly could say
I think,
you're
yeah.
being repetitious or something in a civil manner, but still, that's up to the chair to decide.
I don't think that's going to really help us, because I don't think anyone has spoke more than 10 minutes here.
Yeah. I think,
No, I
we've
don't think
gone
we've
way
abused that
over.
rule, not even come close.
I think before we really continue, we've got a motion on the floor, so we should get a second before we continue our discussion. So there's a motion on the floor to codify in our rules, Robert's Rules of Order, 10, number two times to speak in 10 minutes each. So is there a second?
Well, I will second for discussion.
Okay. A second by Neil. So we'll continue on. So, yes, Sarah.
And I mean, I guess like to address the issue about re-upping somebody, like reiterating the same argument somebody had multiple times. I mean, I think limiting it to twice, you state your case initially, and then, I mean, that may limit the person to say, oh, I'm going to turn on my speaker and say the same thing if no new information's come up. I mean, I think it would just sort of streamline the process a little bit, but it still allows for being voted on to extend the person's ability to speak. So it's not like it's going to muzzle anybody.
Yeah.
That's my position.
Yep,
And I don't know if we need to clarify this also, but asking questions does not count against your time. So making sure that everyone knows that that's the case.
If I
Yeah,
might,
go ahead, Tom.
asking questions, but, by their very nature, they're asking to be answered, or further discussed, So, I mean, that also, to me, is just, it's furthering the discussion in a positive manner. If someone answers a question, I'm expecting somebody on council to answer the question, ideally. So, you can't always form everything into a question if you've got something to say. Perhaps, we should have some kind of structure to where we invite council members to either, off the cuff or from prepared notes, state their position on an agenda item in a kind of a formal manner. And that could be the 10-minute thing. Stand up for 10 minutes or sit from your seat for 10 minutes and give your presentation, as it were. And then go into discussion mode. And that's where I think it'd be best if the chair of the meeting sort of maintained a reasonable pace and focus and exerted some kind of scholarly control over what's transpiring in the discussion. if the discussion seems like it's going nowhere, or it's being repetitive, or that's getting off track, it's not germane to what we're talking about, then, that's why there's a gavel up there. Don't have to use the gavel, but you can use your power gavel, if you will, to just kind of get us, kind of corral us up and make us, stay on point and get it done. So I prefer that, an open-ended thing where the chair is allowed to steer people, into productive directions, so that we don't just kind of willy-nilly keep talking.
Okay? Mayor, something, looks like you've got something to say.
Well, yeah, it kind of sounds like Alder Neal is suggesting we move to floor speeches, kind of like Congress. And actually, there was a moment where I thought maybe after meetings, we should have a spin room for council members who want to share their viewpoints on whatever happened too. I don't know. I don't know what helps the council make decisions, and I think we should do that. I don't have that answer.
I mean, if we wanted, using Neil's philosophy, I mean, with 2 debates of 10 minutes each, you would have that opportunity to use your first 10 minutes to state your case, ask questions, and then the final 10 minutes to, wrap it up. So if you wanted to use your time, wisely in that manner. I think I don't know if we're, I don't want to say, we're curtailing debate, but I think we're trying to just create a little bit of time management here to keep things on track. And if you've got a little bit of limits, and then you come to the meeting prepared so that you can state your case and we can move forward on the issue. But to see the mayor's point, I think, yeah, this is kind of a difficult balance to sort of achieve. So.
I've been a part of bodies that have actually placed limits on agenda items, like we will discuss this for 20 minutes, we will discuss that for 10 minutes. I don't know, again, like that's relying on me or staff to make that kind of almost editorial judgment on how much time you should be allowed to discuss any given item, but it is an option there for you.
Yeah, Neil?
Yes, thanks again, Mr. Chair. Well, I'm in my, 7th year on council, and, I've attended council meetings that, took an hour and a half, and I've attended council meetings that went, till the cows came home, because of subject matter, public interest, range of opinions, emotion, everything like that comes into play. I'm really reticent on this agenda item to, particularly to act tonight. I think we're scratching the surface, but we have to bear in mind the perception that this is going to have, not only amongst our colleagues on council, but also those who watch us. And if there's a feeling that there's stifling of discussion going on, that people are getting, muzzled, that's not going to sit well. I mean, I already get, pretty frequent pushback on the 3-minute rule for public comments. Because it's like, hey, it takes more than 3 minutes to talk about this issue. I'm really reticent to act tonight, unless it's on the side of pretty much, keeping it free as possible, but reasonably keeping it on track. That has to be the thing, and to me, that's what chairs are there to do, not just at council, but in committees. It's too easy to go off topic and on a tangent, and telling, anecdotes. It's just too easy. And I think a chair should be able to say, well, Alder Neal, could you kind of, wrap up your point, and let's you know, we'd like to get, you know, to the point where we might be able to act on this or see what other people think. You know, I just don't like soapboxing. And is there anything we can do to kind of curtail that through direction from chairs?
Jim?
I agree, and I am not going to support this motion based on, it's the same as we already have with the default. And I think we should just stick with the default for now and then keep this discussion moving along in the future in case we have any problems. And kind of count on the chair, whoever it is at that meeting, to kind of keep the meeting moving along, to recognize when we're talking things in circles and to get us going. And does that sound reasonable for now?
I think just to clarify, if we vote yes on this motion, all we're doing is codifying the rules that we've accepted. That's the default for Robert's Rules of Order to be written into our council rules. If we vote no, then we still stay with the default Robert's Rules of Orders, which is exactly the same, but we don't place it into our council rules.
However, if the rules ever change, if Roberts ever change, we'd have to go through this again.
You're correct. So I think, Sarah, did you have something, or?
I call the question.
Okay. Let's see, are there any debate on calling the question? So, no.
You need a second, and then
Okay.
you can ask them all by consent
Right.
whether they've all agreed that the debate should end. Or you can take the formal motion, get a second, and then you have to vote on whether or not everybody thinks the debate should end. And if that passes, then you go back and vote on her original motion.
So do we have, okay, so we have a second on calling the question.
I'll second one question.
Okay, do we consent to call the question, or?
Yes.
All right, not hearing anything, let's call the question and vote on the motion. So, let's see, Neil,
No.
Wadinsky,
No.
Watson,
Yes.
and I will vote no, so motion fails. 3-1. Okay, so we will stay with, I guess we'll stay with the default Robert's Rules of Order and move on to item number 3. Discussion and possible action on the Rules Review Committee developing rules guidance related to the role of the chair and related to when it is appropriate for a member of the body to call the question.
Great segue, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
All right, well, I brought handouts, and I sent this to you electronically this afternoon as well. From the UW Extension Local Government Center, these were actually written by, I think, Larry Larmer, who has come and spoken to the council in person in the past. Great parliamentarian. Anyway, the first one you had on the agenda was the role of the chair, but related to when a member of the body calls the question. So I've got 2 handouts here that kind of cover both issues more broadly. So you all know a chairperson has every right of every other committee member and council member. You can make motions, you can second motions as a chair, and you can vote. The only difference is when the mayor is leading a council meeting, she is a full member of the council, but she's the only non-voting member of the council. So if she wanted to make a comment about some issue that she felt really strongly about, I have seen it done where she's handed the gavel over to the clerk and let them like run the meeting while they make a statement or something. But that's the only situation where the chair of the council cannot vote. So that's the restriction on that. So they would vacate the chair. That is a rule, though. However, you could put in your rules, you could ask the mayor to do that voluntarily, or you could impose a rule that required her to vacate the chair. if she wanted to second a motion or participate in discussion. Then when you get to the calling the question, as I said, when you ask when it's appropriate, it's really done by any member when they're just tired of listening to everything and they think the debate should end, or that people have had enough times to speak, or that they're starting to repeat their positions, or we've heard enough, now it's time to make a decision. And you won't always all agree that it's time to call the question, and that's why you can go ahead and ask if there's a unanimous consent for ceasing debate and then moving forward, or you can take a formal motion and a second, but then you vote on the motion to end debate. So everybody still gets to weigh in on whether they think debate should end. Just merely calling the question doesn't automatically end the debate, because you have to vote on the motion or unanimously consent to ending debate. Then you move on and vote on the original question. So any chairperson, the mayor in the council context, or a chair of a committee, as you saw this evening, you would take it like any other motion, get a second, it's not debatable, and take a vote, or when she makes the motion, instead of taking a second, ask if there's unanimous consent to end debate. Then you don't have to vote on that motion. So, Rule 7 in your rules, I don't know if you can pull that up for us, please, Nate, talks about the presiding officer. So if you want to make any, just as you keep these and you're thinking for future meetings too, or agenda items you want to bring up, or other changes or amendments you want to make, that's where I would put those under Rule 7, because it talks about the presiding officer. Not necessarily the chair, because it talks about the mayor being the presiding officer, because these are council rules, so we're not, that's where I said I don't think this applies to committees. But it does talk about questions of order. Under C, an alderperson can raise a point of order, and the presiding officer in turn shall immediately rule on that question. So you could add something into that rule that says when the question is called, the presiding officer will first ask by unanimous consent if everyone wants to end debate. I mean, otherwise she would do that on her own. But again, if you wanted to formalize this, that's the rule I would suggest you make, and that's where I would suggest you put it under Rule 7. So does anyone have any questions on that? Did I answer the questions or the curiosity under that agenda item? I guess I can't call on you. I'll let you call on Sarah.
Sarah, go ahead.
So is there, I should know this, but is there anything in these rules that govern the chair of committees? I mean, or that wouldn't be found here, or?
No, presiding officer is the closest thing, so
Okay.
that doesn't talk about chairs of committees anywhere. And that's where I go back to saying, if you want to make these more applicable to the, like, let's say the 7 standing committees and the council, because other non-standing committees and other special committees have members beyond you elected alders, we can certainly do that. I mean, they're your rules, it's your body, so we could add another rule that applies to standing committee chairs, for instance. Yes, absolutely, but
So-
you're right, there isn't anything else in here other than this rule on presiding officer.
So that would be more advisable to add a new rule for standing committees versus like trying to mod one, right? Modify something into, like fit it into these.
Again, I suppose that's kind of a matter of style. I think it could be done either way, but if at the beginning we want, as we work through these, if we see other areas where we want to make sure that what we're talking about applies equally in standing committees, then I think I'd make some statement at the beginning of the rules, and then we could lump everything together, or, I don't know, I'd probably make it a separate heading, because you see Rule 7 presiding officer, we'd say Rule 7A, I suppose we could call it, so that it follows that, standing committee chairs. Just some ideas I'm throwing out off the top of my head, but again, these are things the mayor would know how to do at a council meeting anyway, but if you wanted to formalize it and put it into your rules about calling the question or anything else, there's already enough in there on her about her ruling on points of order. The mayor may speak on any question or make any motion, that's already in there, 7D. If she vacates the chair and designates, I'm sorry, not the clerk, the council president to preside temporarily. So that already is codified in there. And then her veto power is laid out as well. So I don't know if you want to add something after questions of order about calling the question, or if you even feel that's necessary, again.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, well, I think we just kind of set precedent tonight. If it's not been done before in a committee, we just did it. And I don't see any problem with codifying it, to put it, in the books, per se. Because I would welcome this kind of activity at any committee meeting.
Yes, Sarah.
I've been watching several Marathon County Board Supervisor, board meetings lately, and I like how they deal with it too when somebody calls the question, like if anybody is in the queue to speak, they can still speak, and then you would, you then vote on the calling the question. And I like that idea, because then it doesn't stifle somebody, like, especially if we get back here and all these red lights go off, I might be like, oh, I'm gonna call the question, and all of them will go off, right? But then if we call the question and still allow people to speak in the order that they were in queue, I think that would be a cool
I agree.
thing to do.
I just
Right,
want
that's
to
a
let
good
you know
point.
that was my rule change for the county board, so thank you for noticing.
Well,
Yeah,
that's great. I think we talked about it actually at your last meeting too, and I agree with you. That's, because otherwise then it is used as a hammer or, as a way to cut somebody off that you see has their light on. And so we usually have allowed people who've had their lights on before the motion was made to speak.
And that's,
But again, that's something you could codify by putting in the rule, much like the county does.
and that was one of the concerns that was brought up, that calling the question could stifle discussion or cut off prematurely discussion if somebody wanted to, I suppose, shut down discussion. But I've recently caught a couple county board meetings, and I thought that was a very elegant solution. So, Sarah?
So Mayor, I guess I can't address them. So I wonder if Mayor Rosenberg would share her lovely authored rule so we could insert it into this.
Totally, we can definitely, we can copy it, or we can just, the idea remains the same. If your light is on and the question is called, you still have the opportunity to speak, however you want to put that in language.
Okay. I think Jim and then Sarah again. So, we're a little more informal than that, but
No, you've already had your 10 minutes,
My
so
only-
we're.
No, I have
counting.
9.
I'm kidding.
My only question on that would be, what if the person talking just wants to reiterate and carry on, and would the chair have the ability to shut them down or to get them on point?
Yeah, I think so. It just depends on what discretion the chair feels comfortable taking and saying, oh, okay, move along, or we've already covered this, or you've made your point,
I mean,
or
I want everybody to have the opportunity to speak.
We wanna
but I don't
stay
wanna
on
hear it
task.
over
Yep.
and over.
that's in the chair's hands.
Thank you.
Sarah and then the mayor. Or,
And I guess, it's like, including that in the rule obviously would mean that our lights are perpetually on. Like, once I finish talking, I'm going to put it on again so I'm in the queue. I would hope that that wouldn't come to pass. But and then I totally lost my train of thought, so.
go ahead, Mayor.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention that, when we talk about, like, when would we keep people on, like, prevent people from speaking or maybe redirect, I feel that when we have issues, when we're talking about finances, it's super important that everybody has that opportunity to ask questions and debate and say their piece. I think that's really important. And then sometimes if we're talking about something else that maybe is, I don't know, maybe a social issue or so, I don't know. I think it's really important to be more judicious and allow more speech than less. But that's just my philosophy, I guess.
It never hurts to give everybody a chance to speak. But, yeah, I think, Sarah, to your point, if there's, if somebody calls a question and, people are already in the queue, I don't think, if you're perpetually hitting your button to stay in that queue, you're going to use up your 2 debate session, instances pretty quick, so, yeah.
I finally remembered. Okay, so now that we're WebExing though, I think it's important to be aware that sometimes the hand raising in WebEx might not be noticed. So just making sure that's sensitive, especially to make sure those people are in the queue. I think that's my
That's a
only,
good point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So,
and I mean, most of the time the chairs have been really good about it. It's just, I know sometimes it's hard to see the hand or, you know, or if your hand's up, maybe it's not really up.
So are you directing me to draft something now and bring that back for committee approval? Or are you gonna make a formal motion to add that language about once you're in the queue, you still get to speak to the rules and move it on?
Well, I
Give me
think-
some
I
direction.
think we're kind of going in two different directions here because we're talking about adding that rule, but also adding a rule to put, you know, to allow calling the questions as a function of the committee chair too. So,
But I agree with you, but I think they're germane. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's germane enough under this agenda item that we could draft that rule if that motion were made and passed to let people speak who are in the queue.
yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. So, Sarah?
So I move that we add a subsection under Rule 7 about closing, or calling the question, but including language to allow people who are queued to speak, be allowed to speak before the call to question is voted on.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Neil? Any discussion?
So if we vote on this, it'll go to council?
That's what I was gonna ask next after you voted, if you want me to bring it back to committee or see my language drafting, or if the next time you see it, you wanna see it on a council agenda. Or if we wanna hold
I wanna
these
see
for
it,
2 or 3 months, if it's not something we wanna, put in right away, then we could wait and take a bunch of changes through. I mean, that's up to you folks.
I would like to see it before I vote to install it, but I guess if it goes to council, I can do that there.
Yep, you'd see it before council and you could still move to amend it on the floor too.
I guess it depends on how quickly you want to see the rule enacted. You know, if we want to hold it for the next meeting so we can fine tune it, or if we want to move it right away to council. So, Mayor?
I guess I was just thinking, it probably makes sense to have a rules discussion at council with a couple of rules that we're talking about. I don't know why my brain just automatically wants to go there, but maybe it's because we only talk about rules once a term, basically, and that's the very first meeting where you're not even comfortable with these yet, so maybe it is good to have multiple discussions over a period
That's
of
certainly
meetings, so I don't
possible.
know. I just changed my mind by talking, so.
Sarah?
And I mean, I think tonight we can bring at least 2 maybe modifications back, like maybe we can get something with regards to the chair of committees that we could have written up. And if we could have at least those 2 things to maybe take back and have a discussion. And then also, maybe we could even discuss about the time limits and amount of speaking time and just see what everybody else is sort of thinking. But just seeing it in council, I don't need to see it. I mean, Ann, I'm sure is going to write something awesome.
I'll try. I just want to make sure I'm clear. So you've made a motion now. Did you get a second on her motion?
Neil, yeah.
Okay, so you're saying put the rule in the rules, including the bit about if you're in the queue, you should be able to speak. So you want me to codify this whole calling the question thing that I just kind of described in the rule? Okay, that's your expectation. And then I'm bringing it back to this committee, or I'm taking it to council? Bring everything back here? We're changing tonight?
I think that it seems like the consensus is to bring this rule to council. So,
Okay.
is that the intent, with your motion?
Yes, I mean, I can include that language in the motion and take the rule directly to council.
Their next meeting, you can include
Neil,
that.
you okay with that?
Sure.
April 13th? Okay, very good.
Okay, so I guess if
You
there's,
vote?
if there's no more discussion, we'll take a vote. So, Neil,
Aye.
Wadinsky,
Aye.
Watson,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye as well. Carries 4-0.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we want to continue with calling the question for committee chairs before we move on to the next item? Yeah.
Well, I just had a question. Is this sort of along the lines of defining the, like, more or less Control C, copy Rule 7 about presiding officer and putting it like Rule 7A and fleshing out some of the functions of a chairperson of a standing committee, or no? Is that off the agenda? I mean,
I don't know. That might be a future agenda item.
Okay.
Maybe rules for committee chairs.
Because then I think at this time, at this time, if we don't have a section that actually is devoted to a chairperson of a standing committee, there's probably no reason to talk about calling the question for a chairperson, right? Because we don't have specific. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
If I could add,
yes.
well, I think though we've got an understanding that the committee chairs have all the same rights as, full member of the committee to do anything any committee member can do. But maybe above and beyond that, there are things that are in the purview of the chair that we need to address at a future meeting.
I would tend to agree, and I think that would be something that we should save as a future agenda item. So,
Is it possible for that future agenda to have something like a hypothetical Rule 7A? That,
Yes, in the form of an ordinance amendment, like we put them on council agendas. Yep.
so that like you guys could work on sort of framing something and then we could talk about the actual language next time?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
okay. So I guess that kind of seals that, so we'll move on to item number 4. Discussion and possible action relative to whether council members should be required to use city-issued devices for city business and meetings, including discussion and possible action on council members' requests for alternative devices, that is, laptop instead of iPad, et cetera. So, and I think we had a little bit of, I think we discussed this briefly at the last meeting, and we talked a little bit about the American Disabilities Act at the last meeting, just to kind of refresh everybody. I don't know, is there any further discussion on this? And Nate, do you want to have anything to add?
So I talked with Jerry upstairs. He's on vacation this week, but he said that there is a major cost difference between a laptop versus an iPad to provide to the council members. And then there's also going to be more training and more support required for a laptop versus an iPad. But if it's something that you guys are that you are very serious about, he said he could provide more specifics and then also come to one of these meetings and talk further about that.
Okay.
As opposed to using personal devices, he said that he is very, very uncomfortable with installing or doing any sort of support on a personal device because of the liability, the firewalls and all that. He doesn't want to get into working on Alder's personal devices. He would prefer if they were city-owned devices.
Is that in like as a help desk issue, or it's that certain types of software, or just?
I can't speak exactly for what he was saying. Again, he said if you guys need to know more about his concerns and hesitations with doing that, he would come talk to you about it. But from what he, I guess, said to me in an email was that he's very uncomfortable working on personal devices.
Okay. Because I know, yeah, on the pads here, I think, for, 90% of what we use is either Outlook or Goodreader, so it's, but configuring Outlook on an iPad, which is the same for, every council member and every county board member, so they, that streamlines their their support process. So I can understand that. But then having to deal with, a variety of laptops in a variety of configurations, because personal device is not going to be the same configuration as a city-issued device. So, yes, sir?
I mean, I guess I could see this being as a more case-by-case basis, like if there's need for some alternative device for somebody due to extenuating circumstances, that would be the call of the person in the IT. But I mean, having these iPads, I mean, they are just a basic tool to check email and then, like you said, read the agenda. Other than that, I don't do anything else besides WebEx on this, right? But, I mean, case-by-case basis would be fine with me if somebody needs something.
Yeah. Deb?
Oh, thank you. I was going to say for myself, I've been using computers since mid-'80s. So I've been using it for quite a while. For me, I ended up having cataracts removed about 5 years ago, so I have to have reading glasses on all the time. But for when I was trying to look at the tablet, I have a 27-inch monitor at home that I was using my desktop and then tuning in. And for me, I use the widescreen. I'm a data girl, so I'm looking widescreen and wanting to blow that up. When I inquired at Happy Mac a couple of months ago, they said that for the iPad, there is no plug for a monitor. There is no plug for USB, all these other things. And for some of my residents, I'm writing Word documents. I was given information from the prior alderperson Dennis Smith, that he had put together a spreadsheet regarding all the violations and did it in alphabetical order, so he could see a trend if there were certain owners or landlords that had multiple properties with violation issues over a period of time. And I guess with my plans were, once we have more of the census data information available for the city, to do some major analysis of it. I understand from the city of Wausau, you may not have staff capable to really get in there and crunch that data, but that when we look at the poverty rate and all that, and affordable housing, there is lots of data, and other major cities like Milwaukee or Chicago are using that data to look at how they do their services. So for me, it just seemed that the tablet, I can't see it. What am I supposed to do? Just go kind of like this. And then, of course, I can't see the data that to the extent that I do with a 27-inch monitor. And I brought this up, I think, back last spring. Well, could I have a monitor then to hook to the, to the tablet so I can see it in the size I want to? And that was a no, but I realize now the iPad had not that capability. So I think there's a number of points, and I have other software and stuff at home. So, I do have the whole Microsoft suite. And then I guess I look at it beyond just using the iPad to do a thumbs up or yeah, and then my initials that I plan on doing writing and responses and just not thumbs up kind of thing in my initials. So it all depends on the alderperson and what their intent is. Thank you.
Yeah, Sarah?
I guess, like, if you're, I did some robust data analysis when we were talking about the home values on Thomas Street, but I just use my own device at home, Excel, right? But if I'm doing, like, basic city council functions, the iPad is okay for me. But I think a case-by-case basis might be a good thing to sort of evaluate the needs of just individuals that may need something more
Yeah.
need, like vision or something like that.
And I know I've used, my personal device for like, yeah, if you want to draft a letter or work on a spreadsheet or something like that, because we really don't have those tools on our pads. And then you have to move it over from one thing to the other, email it to yourself or whatnot, and cut and paste and attach, and so it gets a little putsy, but it's, yeah, and I mean, generally I use mine just for agendas and emails. So, Sarah?
Sorry, I guess my question would be, because you mentioned it was cost prohibitive or more expensive than the iPad. I mean, I think it would be interesting just to see how much it would cost to have laptops. And then, I mean, I think it's all about cost savings probably too. We have this all set up on the iPad, but cost benefit analysis on that, right?
I would agree. It's, yeah, get some numbers there to see what the actual support costs are. CCIT must know how much it costs to support a pad versus a laptop, because other city employees are using laptops for their day-to-day, so. Jim?
I guess I'm okay if people want to use their own equipment, if IT is okay with it, if the city attorney's office is okay with it. But I'm not going to do it. And I would prefer a laptop, but I'll use what they gave me.
So I think what the main issue is just, you can use your own stuff, it's just CCIT is not going to touch it, from what I've heard from Jerry. And then also with, I guess, the preference of an iPad or a laptop, I don't think this is really a council rule we would be adding to the ordinance. This is just mainly, I don't know, a discussion just to have of, yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think if you guys wanted to push it further when we get down to the last agenda item and figure out the next meeting date, just we would make sure that we'd have Jerry or somebody from IT here that then could answer the cost,
Yeah.
questions.
Maybe that would be best, unless somebody's got something else to weigh in on this, but to just kind of hold on to this for the next meeting.
I just want to make a follow-up comment to what Jim said, and I understand what he's saying. I mean, he's saying, I prefer to use city-issued devices, and I'll use what they gave me. And yes, you should, to the extent that you can, conduct your city business on city-issued devices. Otherwise, you don't know whether, I mean, you're setting yourself up for the potential of an open meeting violation, potentially. But you always have to keep in the back of your mind when using, personal devices. And if you're using personal devices to conduct city business, like you said, now you've got to put it all into an email to yourself, so it's now in your city email address. Otherwise, Jerry's not going to provide backup. He's not going to do anything to help you retrieve stuff off personal devices to answer open record requests and things of that nature. So I understand what you're saying. We've already talked about having your personal phones here for emergencies. I don't have a problem, obviously, with any of that, but just always think about open meetings and open records when you're using your personal devices. But yeah, that's great. We'll invite Jerry to the next meeting and he can give us much more information.
Okay. Anything? Yes, sir.
I just had a quick question. I mean, is there anything that would need to be written into the rules about, like, keeping communications, on city-owned devices? I mean, that doesn't really fall into the rules. It's just more of a suggestion.
No, it's state law, which is going to supersede your ordinances anyway. So
Okay.
again, much like Robert's rules, we're repeating a lot of stuff you're supposed to know anyway, but from other sources, which wouldn't necessarily hurt to codify to put it in there, but I don't think I would recommend attempting to put anything about open records and open meeting law compliance in your rules, because we expect that anyway. That's expected of you by state statute.
Or like using city-owned devices, or, I mean, there's
I don't-
really not a place for
I
it.
don't know how we could do that. Because you could use your personal devices without violating any laws, And so to hamper you by saying, you know, you can't draft this on something else if you're somewhere else, or you can't ever use anything but your iPad, I think that's rather restrictive.
I don't
So,
think,
I
I
mean-
don't think we want to go there, do we?
Is there any reason to talk about this again then?
It may not, I mean, not this part, it would just be to discuss
Nope.
the.
Can, microphone, Nate, please?
I don't, oh, it is working.
You got to get it right up to your mouth.
Like, around my lips. Let's see, what was I saying? I think the only thing that we need to talk about is just if we would want to have the option of an iPad versus the laptop to give out to the council members, and then just the cost of that and if it's feasible.
But would that be an us thing or a council thing? Like, it's not really a rule.
No, it's not a rule at all.
So
It
then
would
we don't-
mainly, this probably should have been something that would be at like the retreat or something, or,
Just like we talked about putting email access on our cell phones. That was discussed at the council retreat.
So then when would the next time we would, if this would be appropriate to bring up?
Well, we can, next meeting, we can have Jerry in here and talk about the cost benefit.
But I mean, are we as a rules review committee going to act on it?
Well, we could consider it as a rule and then have them come talk, and then we would not have to consider it anymore. We don't want to.
Yeah.
well, I do see what you're saying, because, yeah, if he comes and tells you guys, hey, it's gonna cost $800 for a laptop, $500 for an iPad, and then you're saying, okay, great, now what do we do with this information?
So would this be like a finance
How do
committee
we
thing?
do the next step? And I think that's correct. I think we then have to then go to finance,
Yeah.
to see if,
So maybe we can just refer this issue to like finance to talk through the logistics with Jerry and see if it's something we want to pass on to council, right?
yeah, so I guess with that, do you even want Jerry to come here, or do you just want Jerry to then go to the next finance committee meeting and we would discuss it there?
Could you maybe just email us some information ahead of time so we're prepared on costs?
Yeah, Leslie has got something to add to, I think, to the
So,
conversation.
so the reason that this came up as a topic in the first place is because sometimes I get requests from alders to say, hey, can I have an iPad because I can't do this, or can I have a laptop? So I think the thought was, we need to define when is it appropriate, or when would the council be comfortable saying, yes, we will go ahead and give you a laptop when everyone else has an iPad. So that was the whole meaning of this, like, what are the criteria? When is that appropriate? Those kind of things.
That makes a little more sense, so.
And I mean, that makes sense, but I guess if it's not something we're going to write into the rules, what committee should this be kicked to determine those criteria for you? Because I think that's the issue, right?
Well, there'd be a finance issue if there's money involved. I mean, I can't think of any other committee that would really want to tackle it or need to tackle it.
Yeah, and I guess then it also comes down to, do they keep the laptop? I mean, if you're talking about just a one-time request or a temporary request of then fulfilling it with a laptop, do we want to do that? Or do you want to say, okay, here, you're going to be an older person for the next 2 years, here's your A, laptop, or your B, iPad?
I don't think we want to get into that can of worms, do we?
I like that idea. All the person should have a choice.
Okay.
So then that's what then we have to go to finance for and then budget for. But I don't know if then that means that we would need 11 iPads and budget for 11 iPads or 11 laptops. I mean, again, this would be a finance Jerry question as well, so.
And I think that would be fleshed out through the conversation, right? Like, because, I mean, these are all rolled over, I'm guessing, but then we would ask Jerry how that works. Then maybe, can we kick this back to finance then, about the idea of laptop versus iPad?
I suppose we could. I don't see why, yeah. I don't see why not. So.
I mean, even if they're used equipment, lightly used, I mean, it'd be a good deal on it, maybe it's something you could get, but to have that option would probably be good for some older people.
I don't know what the policy is with CCIT on, when they transition out a piece of equipment, if, what happens to it, if that would be able to be repurposed or not, so.
Well, I think right now they're all repurposed because of COVID. They sat and built laptops from old laptops for a long time until everybody got a laptop. So I don't think they have many used ones laying around right now.
I would rather give the council person an option instead of letting them use their own equipment. That's just not a good idea in my mind.
Okay. So refer to finance or say, or wait for what, or have IT here next meeting and discuss and, yeah.
I mean, I think just having the discussion in finance, because it is about budget now, it's not really about modifying the rules, so I don't think it's really in our wheelhouse anymore. I mean, kick it to finance to discuss, like, is it financially feasible? You know, are we gonna have criteria, we're just gonna
Okay.
let them choose?
And maybe it won't be feasible either in finance or with IT. You don't know. So good-
Yeah.
Good idea.
Okay, well, let's refer this to finance committee and, see where it goes from there. Because it's not necessarily a rule item, so.
And do we want it at the next finance meeting or in a certain amount of time or?
Next finance meeting would be in 2 weeks or a week and a half, wouldn't it? So, would that be enough time? If Jerry's on vacation this week,
Well, that's true.
maybe we should give him a little bit of time to. So on,
So the 27th,
on the 20, yeah, the second meeting of the month,
so April 27th.
yeah. Okay. Let's see, item number 5, discussion and possible action on adding sections to the council agenda for things such as reports from committee chairs on committee work, announcements, comments from council members.
All right.
Yeah,
Are you going to pull up Rule 5 for me, Nate, please, up there, if anybody's looking at the... So Rule 5 of your rules does list the order of business, and that dictates what goes on your council agenda. And over time, they don't always all contain exactly the same things, because if there's not a committee report, Mary or Leslie doesn't typically, and she can correct me if I'm wrong, put on there like committee reports, and then just leave a blank line. They would probably just drop that from that agenda. And then if there is a presentation, they'd add it. You don't always see all of these things on there, and then if there isn't anything, it being left blank. So I think if I'm looking at your agenda appropriately, all of these things are already in here. So you've got reports from committees. That's number 8, Rule 5, number 8, standing and non-standing. Announcements and comments from council members. So you've got 5 is the pre-registered citizen comment. Number 6 is communications and recommendations from the mayor. And then 7 is reports of city officers. So I looked up the definition, the statutory definition of city officers under 62.09. And that includes the mayor, the treasurer, the clerk, comptroller, attorney, engineer, assessor, street commissioner, police and fire commission, fire chief, police chief, board of public works, and 2 elected alders from each district. So it covers all of you anyway. So I think you're completely covered unless you want to change maybe number 7 to say reports / communications of city officers or something like that. But that really is where announcements and comments from council members lies, is in number 7.
and would that be under, like, reports for city officers, just to give an example, that's like when we see the quarterly insurance claims? I think that's usually under communications or
See, that's
reports. For
placed on file. We don't discuss that as part of our business agenda as an item of business, do we, Leslie? That's just placed on file because she's required by ordinance to provide those reports at least quarterly for you.
Because I don't think I've ever hearing a report from city officers at a meeting, so I'm just trying to think of an example.
No, but I get questions over time, and so council members just kind of ask me, or a mayor will ask me, well, can somebody just raise their hand and they want to tell me when their neighborhood meeting meets next or something like that? And so then at the discretion of the chair, they just call on that person and they make a quick announcement. It's not technically agendized though, so those kinds of things I would put under, if a alder has a report of some kind, I would recommend putting it under number 7, and then not just their name, but then you put the name of the report, because you have to sufficiently agendize what topic you're gonna have to, in order to meet the open meeting law. So like, you wouldn't just put presentation, maybe fire department, or presentation : Gadorsey. You'd say presentation : Gadorsey site plan for Wausau's new mall or new plan or something like that. So then you, for under city officers, you could have, you know, just an announcement about a meeting, a neighborhood meeting, I don't know, needs to be agendized. But if they have a special report, or they're like one council person, let's say on an advisory committee or something, and they want to give an update or a report to the council, that's one example I can think of. But everything I think you're contemplating, unless I'm missing what number 5 means, I believe is already covered in Rule 5 in your order of business.
Yeah,
They just don't always appear on every agenda because there aren't any.
okay. So, Sarah,
So I
or
think this,
or Leslie?
I think this item came from you, Mayor, and when I saw it, I thought maybe it meant more like if there's something going on in each alder's district that they want to talk about, or like if Jamie Polly wants to talk about what's going on in Parks and Rec.
So, yeah, I think for me, there were two kind of separate agenda items. Like, one is reports from committee chairs or officers, whatever that looks like. I think talking about city business that might, you know, an update here or there. And then the other one was more of kind of an announcement, like maybe at the end of the meeting, like, hey, I had somebody in my district, I want to give her a shout out because she made it to state wrestling and she's awesome. You know, like we had a number of opportunities to give, you know, comment you're not public, as an elder person, you don't give public comment. And so I kept seeing people coming to the day, or coming to the public comment area. And I guess I wanted to give them an opportunity to have that comment or announcement section without having to, you know, kind of march around and whatever. So there were like kind of a couple different things kind of rolled into maybe one.
Okay, so that idea though is not city business
Right.
related, and so that probably would not belong in the order of business to be agendized. But
Right.
if they're doing it under number 12, comments and suggestions from citizens, that's why we usually have them leave the dais, because it's a more symbolic, obvious departure from their role as an elected alder, but they still retain their rights as a public citizen as well. So symbolically, we've always had them just leave their chairs and come down here and then they can talk about anything they want that has something to do with city business but wasn't on the agenda that night, or anything at all. But the council can certainly change those rules.
Sarah?
So we can't like add something to it and not have to like express exactly what we're gonna say. Like what Katie was saying, if I wanted to say if something cool like was done in my district, like I would have to remove myself from my capacity as alder and be just just saying it as public comment. Like we can't like add number 13, like comments and shout outs from, maybe not shout outs, but comments from alder.
I guess I wouldn't recommend that because it's not really part of your formal business meeting. And you're not going to be able to sufficiently agendize it to put the public on notice what you're going to say or do.
And you would have to. So if I wanted to say,
meet open meeting.
so if I wanted to say like so-and-so has an awesome garden on block, whatever, it's dorky. But if I wanted to say that, I would
Right.
have to like actually have a line item on the agenda if we would agendize it.
I think if we
I
wanted to
think
have
that
it,
falls under 12, public
Yeah.
comment. So what you could do though is have the mayor say that okay, I'm calling for public comment, calling once, twice, 3 times, nobody comes up from out here. If a council member turned their light on and then wanted to say whatever they wanted to say, couldn't you just recognize them and call on them at that point and they could make
Sure.
all of their comments during public comment at the conclusion?
Sure, that's fine. I guess,
I suppose you could do it at the beginning too, because that's pre-registered items appearing on the agenda, but also for any public comment. It's just not typically used for that at both ends. but it is in your rules.
I guess this one is another one that, we used at the county board level, where at the end it was called announcements. And, whoever from, the Marathon City would tell us that there's a dairy breakfast on Sunday, or like whatever it is, like stuff that's kind of interesting and of interest to the other people on the body, but,
Well,
not.
you can do that under your communications from the mayor,
Yeah,
because that's any communication. Reports of officers, again, I see that as more of a formal report.
That'd have
And
to be
committee
agendized,
reports would
yeah.
be agendized, like report from sustainability committee or something to finance committee. But I would say anything that you're talking about, you could put at the beginning or at the end under public comment and just not require the council folks to leave their seats if that's what you'd like to do.
Sarah?
Okay, so along a different line, I guess, with regards to committee reports, I mean, is it possible to have all standing committees every council meeting give like just a summary and have that as a constant agenda item? I mean, it's in here, so I mean, is that just a bookkeeping?
A placeholder. And I guess maybe things have changed over the decades. Maybe they've used all these agenda items all the time, every time. I think it kind of depends on the taste of this elected body. So this particular body, that would be pretty robust. I mean, it would be very open and transparent, and you'd really know what every committee was doing every month. But that's more work then for somebody to put together the committee report and write it and get it down to the clerk's office and get it uploaded into the packet. I mean, if that's something the council wants.
Because I thought we had a
For your standing
discussion-
committees, it's all gonna be more work for you.
Because I thought that was sort of a discussion we were having about having like the vice chair get a little bit more active in the committee role.
Okay.
I don't know why I thought I heard that, like that type of conversation before, maybe having the vice chair getting more active and doing that report, I don't know.
Yeah, they could do that, or the clerk of, whoever clerks that particular meeting and prepares the minutes would probably have a good idea of how to prepare that report too. If that's something the council wants to ask for, we will certainly implement it.
I thought the intent of that, though, for vice chairs to provide a report was to kind of introduce an agenda item before a discussion, and not so much what's happening in debate or what's happening in a committee. Because if there's work in a committee, it filters up into the council, so it's.
Right, you're gonna see it, or if you attend that meeting or watch it live streamed or whatever, or
Yeah.
go back and watch it recorded, or read the minutes of every meeting. I get those put in my inbox, so.
I think there'd be a certain amount of redundancy, if we were gonna have a committee report that says, well, the finance committee worked on such and such and such and such, and then we look down 3 more agenda items, such and such, such and such, such and such shows up on the agenda, so,
You're right, that was what it was.
It
yeah.
might be appropriate though for and we've had an ongoing discussion with the mayor about not only non-standing committees, but advisory committees probably should be making reports pursuant to whatever resolution or ordinance created them and gave them a mission to accomplish. In some cases, it says, you report to CISM or you report to public health and safety. In other instances, it doesn't say. So either those should be clarified, or the work of the advisory committees, which doesn't always filter up to you on your council agendas. That's a place where I think some improvement can be made, is to get more regular input from your advisory committees.
That would be good. More so than standing committee reports, so.
So again, you can look through that whole Rule 5. We can add things to the agenda, move them around, remove things. I mean, again, these can be amended in any way, but I guess I feel like right now they cover whatever it is you're trying to accomplish in number 5.
And I think, Sarah,
I also wonder too with like pre-registered citizens, if it's a council person coming up to voice their opinion on a matter that we're going to debate, is that something that sort of falls into that? Because I would think that they would just then reserve that right to
Right.
debate
We
it.
wouldn't require that of council members to pre-register to be able to speak during a council meeting, because you're a member of the body.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I guess with the pre-registered, common sense suggestions from pre-registered citizens, that's more if the citizen is commenting on an agendized item, but like a council person would then speak on the agendized item at the time of the agendized item, right?
Yes.
So does that limit somebody from, like if I wanted to speak on agenda item 5, and I pre-registered as a citizen and I stood there and said my piece, I guess it's like double dipping. It's sort of avoiding the Robert's rules of order, like speaking 2 times on a issue. Do you get what I'm saying?
I do. I suppose there's nothing that would prevent you from pre-registering and getting your 3 minutes to address the whole council in advance of even getting to that item on the agenda. I've never had anybody attempt to do that, but I don't know that you'd be prohibited from doing that. I mean, you're still a citizen. I suppose you could argue, I mean, I don't think I would stop you if I got caught at a meeting and that happened and they said, what do you think we should do? I'd say, well, they still have their rights as a citizen, and if you wanted to come up and pre-register for an item on the agenda and speak to it for 3 minutes as a citizen, and then take your seat and debate it later as a alder representing your district. I've not seen it done, but I think it could be done.
Would there be a conflict there, though? It's, although, yeah, you know, as an alder, we don't give up our rights as citizens.
Right.
But a lot of our opinion in the debate is created, you know, is colored by, you know, as citizens, you know, this is what we believe, so.
I
And
suppose you could get up and say, I totally in favor of X, Y, or Z, and I feel very passionate about it, and then during the debate, sit down and say, but as the elected alder, I've gotten all this input from all my constituents, and I always do what the majority of my constituents tell me to do, and I got not one call in favor of X, Y, or Z, so I'm here to tell you, despite my personal conviction, I'm gonna not support this proposal. I don't know why you do that, though.
Yeah, you could just do that in your
Just
10
do
minutes.
it in your time.
Do it in your 10,
to
yeah,
speak.
Yeah.
But before the meeting, like I said, we've always used those for people, we make them pre-register right away before the meeting to talk about an item on the agenda. Well, at some point, we were told that might be unconstitutional, and we have to allow public comment for something not appearing on the agenda. So technically, we have that both at the beginning and at the end of our agenda. So that's what I'm saying. A council member could not pre-register, but the mayor says, okay, do we have pre-registered citizens? Do we have anyone else with public comment? I want to give a shout out to my neighbor who made it to state wrestling. Either leaving your seat or not leaving your seat, whatever the mayor asks you to do or whatever the council decides to make as a rule, for instance. Make sense?
I have it in my head that, you know, a member of the body is not a member of the public while they're serving in this capacity. And I don't know why it's bothering me that they would get treated to both, you know, participating and then also, you know, the public comment section. And I don't know where that's from, if it's from some kind of arcane interpretation of whatever, but I'm
I
fine with what
understand what you're saying.
what this body decides. I'm fine with it. I'm also a teeny bit bothered. I can't shake it. So there you go.
Well, and I think it goes back to how I was saying, Mayor Rosenberg, that a person could be able to speak on an issue multiple times, and that would be a way they could get around, like, only speaking twice on an issue. I don't know, I agree. I mean, you're wearing your council hat when you're in here. You're an older person, but, I mean, yeah, I guess we all walk out and go home, too. So.
But I also feel like I can never walk around and be like, I'm just Katie Rosenberg, private citizen. Like, that just never happens. I'm not ever not the mayor while I'm doing this, and you're never not an older. So I don't know, there's something there, and I don't know, maybe I'll be Googling it at 2 a.m. and I'll come back with that.
Anything else? Do we want to take action on this? Do we want to still kind of chew on it, or set it aside for the next meeting?
I like chewing, I want to see what she
You go.
I like chewing, I want to see what she Googles.
My husband's going to be excited for the next Google adventure in bed, so yay.
Sarah?
So I mean, if all these things that we're sort of kicking around are already in our order of business, I mean, I don't think we need to do anything, right?
Probably not at this point. I think, yeah, I mean, it sounds like there was an intent of trying to codify public, how an alder can give public comment in respect to item number 12 in the order of business. But,
All right, Edwin, and you mentioned something about where an alder can give their position, like have it be at the podium or at their seat as being a rule addition. Where would that go?
Well, it isn't a rule addition, you'd
Okay.
just be calling the alder a citizen, which
Okay.
you are.
Okay,
So you'd be registering as a pre-registered citizen.
because I think you were
And then-
talking about the end, number 12,
public comment at the end, not,
about the wrestling thing.
matters.
Right, you could do it you could do it at either end, because it's not reserved just for items appearing on the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. We've always done that, but that's not technically what the rules say. So you should be able to say that at the beginning of the meeting as well. If you're, considering that people leave after certain items they're interested in, not everybody is still here at the end of a meeting to hear your public shout out, they might tune in right away. So I think you could I think you could do that under citizen comment at the very beginning of the meeting.
So then there wouldn't be a need to change a rule or add a rule.
Correct. Yeah, number 5, comments and suggestions from pre-registered citizens, but I'm not sure, or what? Right, or 12, but I think,
Is
Yeah.
authorized under Rule 16.
I'm not sure we changed this ordinance or I have the most current issue, but I know it is, or I think we do put it on the agenda too. I don't know if Leslie's got a copy of the council agenda up there, but I think we say for pre-registered citizens and any other matters or something like that. It does make it clear that you don't have to have an item on the agenda that you want to talk about. Unless we want to, maybe mayor, we just add something that says council announcements or alder announcements or something,
So like you said.
right after 5.
Because
Under
line item
16?
5, it says authorized under Rule 16, and Rule 16 states that, 2 sub B, citizens' comments relate to a matter on the agenda for that meeting. So,
Yeah, so that's why I think what Sarah Watson is discussing I think falls under 12,
Which is at the end of the meeting.
which does not have to be an
Right.
agenda item.
Right,
It doesn't have to be pre-registered, it does not need to be noticed on the agenda. It's just at the end of the meeting, if there are no other
but we
public.
do allow it at the beginning too. This
Yeah,
isn't
or-
clear, but
yeah.
you can make public comment at the beginning as well.
Yeah, at the beginning or the end, if nobody stands up, but an older person wants to say a comment, they would turn their light on, and then the mayor would say yes or no to either coming down here or speaking at their chair.
So then shouldn't that probably have the same, like parentheses after as authorized under Rule 16? Or no?
No.
Because we don't want it to be agendized?
Yeah, exactly.
But wouldn't we want still time limits or is that just an unsaid thing for the final public comments? Because is there a time limit on the final public comments?
I think it's implied, but it would probably be at the discretion of the chair. The chair could say, limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Oh, at the beginning?
No, at the
Yeah, at
end,
the
after
end.
item number 12.
At the beginning or end. So any
Yeah.
comments under,
They're all 3 minutes apiece, public comment, correct?
Well, it's only if it's applied to Rule 16
Yeah.
though.
that's how I read it.
Because orders of business, number 5, it says is authorized under Rule 16, but number 12, there is no rule. There is no rule, item 12 is not referencing any rule in how those comments are supposed to.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, because Rule 16, those are time limited to 3 minutes. But if they are commenting under 12, which is not authorized under 16, because this is just whatever they want to say. I don't think a time limit applies according to our rules,
See, and I don't interpret it that way.
no?
Well, because it's address citizens' right to address council, so they can do it under either 12 or 5, and then B is a separate rule for all citizens addressing the council, no matter when it is, under 5 or 12. They're limited to 3 minutes, period.
Oh,
That's the
I
way
see
I
that.
interpret it.
I see that.
I see how you,
Number one.
I see how you're interpreting Rule 16.
Okay.
Okay,
So I think it applies, you know, citizens' right to address council. Here's your right, here's the 2 times you can do it. But except for informational and public hearings, you're gonna be limited to 3 minutes. So unless the council gives you more time, so it doesn't matter if it's at 5 or 12.
So then, we could put as authorized under Rule 16 behind number 12 too. Because number 12 is in Rule 16.
Oh, you mean back under Rule 5,
Yeah.
sub 12, you mean?
yeah.
I suppose you could.
I know, minutia.
I love the detail. All right, we'll put that in our draft.
Do we need a motion on that? Or not?
Well, I'm not bringing these back, am I? So whatever you said earlier, we're taking to the one is to finance on April 27th,
Yep.
But this would go to council.
right? So unless you want me to draft some of this stuff and bring it back to you to see,
So we would just make the change, we wouldn't need a motion here to make that change. That would just be part of our overall changes that we decided tonight then.
well, no, if you want to make a motion to amend 512, make that motion then, and I'll put it in there, and you won't see it again. It'll go to council.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion if.
Do you think it's too minutiae to change? Is it not worth it?
It's instructive, I think, because then it takes you to another spot to look. I don't have a problem adding it.
Yeah.
Okay, I would move to add to number 12 in Rule 5, in parentheses, as authorized under Rule 16.
Second.
Second by Neil. Any more discussion? Jim, looks like you want to say something?
Negative.
Okay, you want to vote? All right. Well, then let's take the vote. We'll start with Wadinsky,
Aye.
Watson,
Aye.
Anil,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye as well. Yep.
Can I just ask a quick, okay, so what are you bringing, just refresh my memory, the changes being brought to council on our next meeting? It'll be that little parenthesis.
And then
The call the question is going to council, the one where we wanted me to add the rule about what the chair does, and that if you're in the queue, you get to speak again. That one you're not gonna see back. You're gonna see that before council.
And then we'll get to see, it'll come back to the Rules Review Committee about the duties of the chairperson of committees.
I think so. Is that what everybody else's memory is?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of adding, we were going to add that, I thought, as an agenda item for your next meeting to flush out like an extra chapter that applies to chairs of committees. Because I honestly
Yep.
still don't think these
No.
rules really apply to committees.
That's what I got written down on my notes, agenda item, rules for committee chairs,
Yep.
so. Okay. I don't know, anything else on number 5? I think we're kind of good on that. Okay. Determine and set next meeting date. It's item number 6. Let's see, we went almost 2 months since the last meeting, so do we want to come back in a month? We want to come back in 6 weeks, or?
I guess how important is it to get the chairperson of committees language fleshed out? I mean, is it uber important or not? Like, would another 2 months be fine?
I don't know. We're gonna,
That'll probably be good.
the laptop issue is gonna go to finance on April 27, so,
And then the other thing, I guess, would be to talk about if we have a discussion about time limit and frequency, are we gonna have that discussion at council, or that's just gonna be something we just keep revisiting here?
I think the committee needs to have those discussions and then submit something to council. I don't think we're gonna have all that debate in council.
well, that motion failed about, but it's still, the rule still stands. So I don't think, would that go to council since we had a motion, or?
Only if you direct it to. I mean,
Okay.
typically, failed motions don't go, but we do have failed recommendations on the council agenda when that committee feels that it's of something of such import that they want to send it to council anyway, because maybe the majority of the remainder of the council won't feel the same way the committee did. So the committee would have to direct that on a failed motion, they send it to council anyway.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation.
Maybe good to bring it forward and just give everybody a reminder what the rule is, so they know we're,
Would that be confusing, though, to bring that failed motion, even though it's the same as the rule that?
maybe stating that's why it failed, because it's already a rule we have intact, and this is the rule we have intact.
Or is there another way to agendize that besides bringing the failed motion?
Just email everyone.
Right. I was just going to say I could do an email communication to all the council members, because to put it on an agenda, it's going to need a file number assigned to it and a resolution, and I'm going to have to write up all the discussion and everything, and then she'd have to get a motion and a second on it, and then there'd be discussion and.
Good idea.
We'd be expecting action. you know,
Right.
at that point, but so
But if you just want me to put together a memo or something to remind the council of that rule, that we're not going to codify, but to remind them that that's the default under Robert's rules, which you've adopted, I can do that.
That would be great.
Okay.
That's probably the safest. Okay. So do we want to, so 2 months would bring us the end of May, first week of June, so. Would we want to just do an email where we kind of pull dates again? Like we did last time? Unless you think we need to come back sooner, but I think that's probably. Then by then the mayor will have more things that she wants to add to our list.
I was just thinking, how do I want to punish myself in June? So,
Well, there's only one meeting a month in June, so,
perfect. Let's keep it that way.
yeah, one council meeting, so. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Watson, okay, Neil, Watson. And it's non-debatable, so we're meeting adjourned.